Good morning, and I'm going to start by telling you, when I was a little girl, my favorite book was Alice in Wonderland. And there's this great piece in the book where the Queen turns up and she says, "There will be jam tomorrow." And Alice says, "Oh, that's great." And she turns up tomorrow and the Queen says, "There will be jam tomorrow." And then she comes the following day looking for the jam, and the Queen says, "No, there will be jam tomorrow." And a just transition is like that. We're all we've been told it's going to be there, but it sure isn't tomorrow yet. And of course, the just transition isn't jam, it's bread. It's the fundamentals. So that's why I think this discussion is so important today. I think that us coming together and synthesizing our understanding of the problem by means of coming out with a solution is a really valuable way to spend our time. The values that will drive the transition will decide whether or not where we end up will be a good place for working people, their families and communities. And let's face it, the track record hasn't been good. You take the financial crisis, where ordinary workers, low-paid workers, people living in poverty, the vulnerable people, they did not end up well out of the financial crisis. You see now all of the people who brought about the financial crisis, they're now buying enormous yachts. You see people in poverty unable to even get healthcare because of the consequences of that crisis. And we see now the COVID crisis. Again, the people who have lost their jobs are low-paid people. A lot of them women in person-to-person services. A lot of the people who lost their lives because of their job are care workers. Again, a lot of women workers. So it's very much up. We're at a crossroads and we don't know what way we're going to end up. I think that in looking at how we can go about crafting a just transition, we have to be very aware of the context, history, and location of where the just transition is going to impact. And I'm not going to attempt to tell the colleagues here from Poland about their realities in that, but to say that coal is a big issue. There are 180,000 workers in Europe who are coal miners. There are 60, 70,000 working in the energy that uses coal. And it's a source of some frustration to me when I see coal miners blamed on calling for a just transition and a phased change, when everybody knows there's a lot more at stake than just those workers' jobs. But I'm only here to speak for those workers and their communities and to make sure that they have a just transition. But insofar as we can imagine a solution for workers in coal, if we look at cars, we're in a whole different scale of a problem. So if we look at the transition for cars, we're looking at 2.6 million workers directly employed. Admittedly, in Europe, that includes the UK. And you're looking at 13.8 million jobs in the supply chain and the surrounding industry. Now, that's a whole different scale of a problem, to which I can already say 17.5 billion isn't enough to solve it. That's just one sector. So the amount of resources that we've allocated for this are nothing like the scale of the problem that we're looking at. I also think cars not only are facing the problem of the green transition, that sector is also going to undergo the digital change. So we saw in COVID, you've got so many more people working from home. And I just want to say on that, because I didn't want to take the time this morning, but if we heard this morning about her work, how work provides an expressive potential. And there's no opportunity for an expressive potential working in your kitchen or your bedroom. And I think we have massively misunderstood the consequences of pushing people into their own homes to work. And again, as a young woman, I was very interested in Marx and what he had to say about the alienation of labor. And it's one thing to be alienated from your labor when you go to a factory. It's quite another to be alienated by your labor in your bedroom or in your front room with your family. So I don't think that we properly understood the full consequences for work, for the collective of work, for fraternity at work, for trade unionism. But that's a whole different workshop, a whole different discussion, but I do want to flag that as being part of what's going to happen in those industries. So what we need is an industrial strategy, the like of which would have been quite a normal thing for politicians and people in the public sphere to speak about in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. We wouldn't even have electricity if it wasn't for public involvement in putting all of that together. So what is the new industry, and where is the money coming from to deliver on that? And how do we make sure those workers who are going to lose their jobs get the chance for those jobs in those new industries? And that's only the first question, because the second question is, how do we make sure that the jobs in those new industries are decent? Because right now they're not. So the workers who have taken up jobs from oil and gas went into the wind, the offshore wind, and their jobs, terms and conditions are not even half what they had in that sector. So that, and part of that is driven by government's decisions about low cost, about deciding that they want, for public procurement, they want the cheapest option. And how do you get the cheapest option? You don't pay people decent terms and conditions. That's one of the ways you achieve it. So I think it's really, we can't have governments on the one hand saying, yes, we're going to have a just transition, not making sufficient money available, not having plans in place, not having an industry strategy, and then driving low cost. And then we're supposed to sit and believe them about that the just transition is around the corner tomorrow. I think there are lots of other relevant matters for the community, but I know that Joe is going to talk about how we make sure that the communities who are affected, because it's not just the workers as individuals, it's workers as families and communities. There are two of the points I just want to make and get them on the table as well in terms of what the constituents of a just transition are. The first of those is training. Now, I hear all the time politicians saying what we need to have is training so that people can make a transition. Now, let's leave aside the transition to what job where. Let's leave that aside. Let's leave to one side the fact that courses cost money. A course that's going to give you the type of qualification that's going to give you access to a quality job is expensive. And how you're supposed to afford that on low pay, I don't know. But let's leave that aside. Let's then think about, for a lot of workers, their experience of training and education was horrific. They did not have a good time when they were being educated. And if the consequences for them of failing at the training is that they can't get a job or won't be able to stay in the job that they are, we need to make sure to make training as being a decent experience for people in which they feel safe. Because all too often now, in a lot of jobs, it's management by fear. Workers are afraid of the consequences. They're afraid they're going to be managed out. They're afraid that they're going to be singled out. So we need to make sure that training is both accessible, affordable, and gives a realistic chance of success to people. I remember when I was a young shop steward, I worked in a factory that made microchips when microchips were the size of matchboxes. And we were trying to negotiate the introduction of computers. I'm almost finished. No, okay. We were trying to introduce the introduction of computers, and I went down to the workshop where we kept all the stuff, the inventory, and there were two guys who worked there, and they were absolutely resisting the introduction of computers, and I couldn't understand it, because their working life was going to be 100 times better if the computers were brought in. And I went down and met them, and then somebody pulled me aside and said, Esther, what you don't understand is the head guy down there can't read and write. What he has actually done is he's memorized, absolutely memorized, the whole page where everything is and everything. So he's afraid that when all that is gone, he'll be found out as not being able to read and write because of the introduction of computers. Now, although that was the 1980s, I still meet people today who can't read and write. And we're trying to say to those people, education and training for the new digital world of work is your solution. Is it any wonder people don't believe us? So we need to make realistic opportunities available to people. Now, and I think it's important to say on that, it's not that working people are in any way incapable of learning. It's just that they haven't had chances. They haven't had the type of chances that everybody in here has had. So we need to make sure we have second, third, and fourth chance education opportunities for people as well, so that they can get onto the track of those other jobs. But I just hear so often training put forward as being the main solution, and when you meet with groups of workers, they just roll their eyes at that, because they know that the pathway that's simply saying we're going to train you for new undefined jobs in an undefined industry in an unexplained place. It's not believable. No. Then there's just to talk a little bit about the other parts of this for working people. There are 50 million people who can't afford to heat their homes at the moment. The majority of them are at work. So you go and you do a tough day's work, and then you go home and you can't heat your home, and your children go to school cold. And I think that we need to think about how we're going to have solutions for those people as well. That we can't just put up the cost of energy and not think about the impact on those folks. And it's somewhat frustrating to me that we don't hear anything about free transport as being the green transition. We don't hear anything about a 4-day work without loss of pay as being the green transition. We don't hear any of those solutions being put forward as being the green transition. Instead, what we hear about is, well, you know, maybe we all have to make sacrifices. And asking poor people to make sacrifices is a bit much. So really, I'm just really happy to be here. I'm really happy that this discussion is taking place. I'm sorry for sounding a bit angry, but I'm angry on behalf of the people I represent, and they expect me to come here and to put that anger on the table as well. But also to put that anger on the table in a way that says we want solutions. We're available to come up with solutions. We have ideas, lots of them, and really you need to give us a place at every table where this is being discussed, so that we can bring the real life issues that have to be addressed, and for them for the solutions to be credible and deliverable, both in terms of the law, the money, the institutions, and the participants that need to be involved in delivering them. Thank you.